Upon completing his residency, he went to the NIH and began his work on papilloma virus. And it's been a very productive number of years in studying papilloma virus. Dr. Lowy has been instrumental in the development of the papilloma vaccines that you are familiar with. His innovative vaccine design on utilizing viral particles for vaccination are the basis for these vaccines. And he was involved in the development of vaccines, the characterization, and early clinical trials. If I'm not mistaken, there's currently a single immunization clinical trial that's being run by the NCI. So he's still very deeply involved. And even though he has tremendous administrative responsibility as acting director of the National Cancer Institute, he's still running his lab. He's a very viable, productive laboratory group. Very amazing and energetic individual. Not only is Dr. Lowy an outstanding scientist who has received many, many awards. You know, among those are the Sabin Gold Medal Award for development of vaccines, and also the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, which was presented to him by President Obama in 2015. So he's highly recognized for his research, but he's also an innovative and dedicated leader in the cancer field. He is Deputy Director of the NCI, appointed to that in 2010, and subsequently was appointed as Acting Director of the National Cancer Institute. He has, that was in 2015. He has vigorously pursued the NCI agenda and has really revamped the funding mechanism for the National Cancer Institute designated cancer centers during his time leading the National Cancer Institute. It provides all of our cancer centers with a tremendous opportunity to invest and develop new technologies and push the cancer agenda forward. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Lowy to you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lowy to Purdue.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess. My voice, I lost my voice during the night. I'm not sure I'm going to find it, but I hope you'll be able to understand what I'm saying, and then I'll figure out how to talk this way. I see that there is such a thing as a free lunch, at least at Purdue, and it's been really terrific. I've been spending the morning hearing from people about the really unique, the unique aspects that you have. And it just seems to me that this is an amazing opportunity for people with non-traditional backgrounds to make very important contributions to cancer research. And Tim has clearly organized the Cancer Research Center around those opportunities. I was asked to talk about kind of what are the, how does the NCI look at things in terms of our research, and what sort of research are we prioritizing, et cetera. In the 35 minutes or so that I'll be talking, I obviously won't be going over everything, but instead trying to highlight aspects, and I hope that at least some of them will be relevant to you all. But before I start, I just want to say that having the cancer centers, Purdue is one of a few basic centers, but the basic centers are easily as important as the clinical centers and the comprehensive centers, not for direct patient care, but in terms of impact on understanding cancer, and here especially for translational implications and just all of the different research, and taking advantage, as I say, of non-traditional backgrounds to really make an impact on this field. Cancer is much too complicated and much too hard to leave it to cancer biologists and oncologists. I really applaud your efforts. This slide essentially talks with you about, yes, we are making progress when it comes to what's happened with mortality rates over the last few years. And what I want to emphasize is it's not all prevention. It's not, you don't need to take pictures. This is the United States government's, and you can keep it, anybody who wants it, okay? And it's not all prevention, it's not all screening, it's not all treatment. It's attributable to a combination of these issues, and it is because of understanding cancer better through research and then developing interventions that we have been able to make progress over the last few years. The middle panel basically shows but 1 person in 4 who dies in the United States dies of cancer, along with heart disease. Those are easily the number 1 and 2 causes of death in the United States. And what's not shown on the slide is that we have 600,000 people who die every year in the United States. And that's the equivalent of a World Trade Center falling down and people dying every 2 days. But this is from cancer. So we can't rest. And we need to remember that no matter how basic our research is, and a lot of my research is very basic, that we are ultimately doing this so that people can live longer, healthier lives through research in cancer, so that we reduce the incidence of cancer, and for people who get cancer, that we improve their outcome through improved treatment and intervention. I mean, really, that's what our mission is. And even if you're doing research on yeast or whatever, you know, it can have enormous implications for cancer ultimately. And so that's why we support a very wide spectrum of research that is designated as cancer. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about how I see what the NCI does in terms of what I call a balanced approach to addressing the problem of cancer. And instead of classifying it as understanding prevention, screening, and treatment, instead, what's the horizon line? And I hope that you'll not necessarily say that's the right way to do it, but that it does have some rationale. And part of the reason is because if there's this long-term research that goes on for more than 15 years, the only place that really can support this in a major way is the public sector. And what we do in the US is the NCI is the major source for long-term research. Intermediate-term research is highly variable, goes from 5 to 15 years. Some of it can be supported in the private sector. And when I say the private sector, I really am including both the private for-profit sector, the pharmaceutical industry, and the biotech industry, but also the private philanthropic sector. But most of the research that goes on that is supported by the private sector is actually short-term, even private philanthropy. It is because people who do private philanthropy in both of these areas, very important, often want to see results yesterday rather than saying, I understand cancer is a difficult problem. If it were easy, we would have solved it already. And so Again, there's important need for the public sector in all of these areas. We try very hard not to compete with either private philanthropy or with industry, and instead to complement what we do. A lot of our research ends up being mechanistically oriented because the research that's done in the private sector often tends to be, do we have a drug that works against this entity? And so a lot of what we do really is to understand mechanism. And yes, we try to understand it for the inherent increased understanding. But as a result of understanding, to be able then to try to provide more interventions, better interventions that are going to help ultimately more people. Just to make that clear. So let me give you a couple of examples of the long-term work. Training a diverse workforce. The people here who are students, graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, you are the future leaders of cancer research. And it's absolutely essential for us to support your efforts. I'm going to be talking in the last part about the Cancer Moonshot. And the Cancer Moonshot, because it's trying to do 10 years of work in 5 in very selected areas, training is not a big part of the Cancer Moonshot. And so it's our regular appropriation that's really critical for training because it takes a long time to train people. Basic research, about half of our resources go to basic research, principally investigator-initiated research. And the beauty of basic research is we don't know what is going to be found. But the problem of basic research is that it often takes a long time for breakthrough discoveries to then be applied so that they are clinically relevant. So let me show you a little bit of data that we have in the NCI. So the top part of the graph shows you what has happened with our R01 and R35 awards since 2013. 2013 was sequestration, so we had a 5% decrease in the budget that year. But what I'd like you to see is that since 2013, we really have been able to increase the number of people to whom we are giving large awards. And I've included the R35s, that's the Outstanding Investigator Awards, because they really are like a big R01. But if you look at the numbers, you will see that the unsolicited, we went from about 580 in 2013 and 14 to 650. And this is during a period when there was an 8% increase in the NCI budget. So that we've far exceeded what happened with the budget. And these numbers just go into it in more detail. What about young people? So our success rates are abysmally low. And it's really for multiple reasons. But one of the reasons is because no matter how many more awards we give, there then is a concomitant increase in the number of applications. And so our success rate for our awards remains at about 14%. But just so you see that for R01s, about 1 person in 5 or 1 person in 4 is a new investigator. This is someone who's never had a major award from the NIH, okay, not just NCI. And the subset, the early stage investigators, represent about 60% of those individuals. The R21, which are the smaller awards, most are for 2 years, some are for 3 years. About 4 people in 10 are new investigators who receive our awards. Again, the success rate's very low. It's under 10%. It's because we have so many applications. But again, with the R21 awards, this doesn't count against you. If you've been a new investigator, if you get an R21, you're still considered a new investigator or an early stage investigator. And I wish that our funding success rate could be at 20%, but it is virtually impossible for us to do that unless there were an enormous increase in the funding for NCI. As it is, because we have ramped up with the amount of new awards in order to make the non-competing awards to fund them at 100%, we have had to increase the total RPG pool by about $200 million over the last 3 years. It's by far the single largest area. These 3 years are, we have funded all three, we have funded all of the non-competing awards at 100%. And I didn't realize how unusual that was, but it turns out that you need to go back to 2003, 4, and 5 for the last time that there were 3 years in a row of funding at 100% for the non-competing awards. And actually, with the intervening years between 2006 and 2014, there weren't even 2 years in a row where funding was at 100%. So on the one hand, we are not serving the community as well as we should. On the other hand, we're trying to do what we can given the resources that we are provided. There are lots of opportunities. I think it's one of the reasons why so many people are excited about cancer research. And it's not just people doing cancer research, it's also the public. They hear about, fantastic responses, et cetera. I mean, for example, President Carter, metastatic melanoma to his brain, treated with immunotherapy, and does what every 92-year-old does, which is to go and build houses for Habitat for Humanity. Okay, I mean it really is remarkable when it works. But as we know, there are so many interventions which only work part of the time, and we really need to understand why is it working then, and why is it not working in the other times, not just for academic purposes, but as I said at the earlier, so that we can develop better interventions, be smarter, and be more strategic in how we deliver our drugs. So with the 5 to 15 years, I just want to talk about translational research and special initiatives. Patient cohorts are critically important. Most cancer centers, or I should say many cancer centers, don't have the extraordinary translational capabilities that you have here in Purdue. And to help our academic researchers to develop drugs, we have the NCI Experimental Therapeutics Program, called the NEXT program, and it really helps academic people who have an idea and have showed some kind of proof of concept to further their drug development. Purdue is just really, I won't say fortunate, because obviously it's been strategic on your part that you have such really high quality translational research, and I think that you probably take less advantage of the NEXT program than some other places which don't have quite the same level of expertise. Then one of the special initiatives is the RAS program. And the RAS program, we've known for many years that about 30% of cancers have mutant KRAS. But efforts on the part of the academic area and the private sector have simply not been successful in developing good treatment for RAS-positive tumors. And so a few years ago, we developed the RAS initiative, which is to try to, the long-term goal is to develop successful treatment for cancers associated with KRAS. Well, why is that important? Well, if you strain your eyes, you will see that pancreatic cancer, about 95% have mutant KRAS. And it's one of the reasons why our success rate has been so dismal with pancreatic cancer. I mean, there are many other reasons, but this is one of them. And the RAS initiative, the hub is at the Frederick National Laboratory. Frank McCormick from UC San Francisco runs it, but they're very important spokes. And so this really is a collaborative, nationwide effort. And one of the things that happened with the RAS initiative, which is really predicated on the notion that technological advances make it potentially possible to try to develop successful interventions against mutant KRAS. But one of the things that has happened is that people in the private sector have seen that NCI is willing to invest some of its resources in this area. And it really has galvanized the community to so that there's a lot more research and a lot more translational research on RAS, far beyond the RAS initiative itself. For 5 years, I am going to talk about the Formulary and some of our clinical trials networks, and I'm going to leave implementation research for one area when I talk about the cancer moonshot. The Formulary is something that may be less important for the Purdue Cancer Research Center, but you all are so innovative that I really wanted to tell you about this in case this is something that might be of interest. Where a lot of cancer treatment research is going from single agent treatment of targeted treatments or immunotherapy to combinations. And we don't understand the rules. On the other hand, people want to do trials of combination agents, and that's how we make serendipitous breakthrough findings based on molecular analysis, et cetera, of tumors. So it usually takes a long time when you want to test drugs from more than one company in a single trial. And so the virtual drug formulary is we have made agreements up front with multiple drug companies. At the moment, it's 7 companies and 26 agents, but there are more that will be coming online in the next 6 months. So if someone at a cancer center wants to do a combination trial, the two advantages of this are, first, it should really shorten the timeline for starting such a trial, because the companies have said that they will say yes or no about a proposed trial with an 8-week turnaround time. But the second thing is that the drugs are being made available not just for clinical trials, but also for preclinical studies, so that if you all want to do things to see what combinations occur, this could be an approach which, if it's successful in preclinical, you might be able to find colleagues. I know that you do an extensive amount of collaboration with Indiana University, but it wouldn't need to be there, for doing something like that. And this is the website for people who are interested in more, and this is at the NCI website. Another thing that is happening with cancer treatment that's really fantastic is there's more and more treatment that is available with oral treatment as opposed to injection. And what this has meant is that with our trials, it is possible for us to bring treatment to the patient rather than the patient to the treatment. And it really simplifies things for people who live in areas that are rural, et cetera, and don't necessarily have immediate access. So our MATCH trial, which started in 2015, it's matches for molecular analysis of therapy choice, is really a paradigm shifting trial. It it's been testing about 25 different drugs for purposes that they are not FDA approved. Some are investigational, but the ones that are FDA approved, it's for treating in other settings. And it's for people who have tumors that are growing for which there is no longer a standard of care. You can enter this trial in any one of more than 1,000 different entry sites throughout the United States. And I thought it's really instructive to see that the highest accrual rates actually have been in states, most of which don't have NCI designated cancer centers. These have been community centers where Oklahoma actually has the most accruals on a per capita basis. But you can see Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, et cetera, are the states with the highest accrual on a per capita basis. When we started it, we initially envisioned having 3,000 patients. But because of funding from Congress for the Precision Medicine Initiative, first in 2016 and now in 2017, we actually doubled the number of patients. And this is really the key part of the Precision Medicine Initiative, which was something that President Obama promoted and initiated. And we were able to double the number of patients. And so we've been able to put many more patients on trial. And we estimate that about, that about a sixth of the patients who enter the trial are able, they get screened by the NCI with a relatively short turnaround time. And then about a sixth of them are eligible with any one of now 31 different arms. And we've already now accrued the 6,000 people in the 2-year period, by far the fastest accruing NCI treatment trial that we've ever had. And many of the arms have been completed. It's to have 30 or more patients in each arm. Some of them have not been, and we are going to be going out to different cancer centers asking about rare tumor variants and having databases critically important to be able to identify patients with these rare ones. Biopsy rates, successful biopsy rates, are higher than probably has been seen in any other trial. More than 90% of the first biopsies are usable for sequencing to determine whether they have the abnormal problem. And what's really terrific about it is that, as I say, 2/3 of the patients come from the community, not from NCI-designated cancer centers. And the objective responses have been observed. Because the trial is still ongoing, we don't yet have analysis, but I hope in the second half of this year that we will begin to have analysis of different arms. And one of the advantages of this trial is that it can be extended to have many more patients simply by going to the FDA, making an amendment, and so the turnaround time should be relatively short, on the order of a month. Another kind of trial that we are doing is a collaboration with the Eastern Oncology Group and the radiologists. The acronym is Akron. And this is a very large trial. It's the first large screening, breast cancer screening trial that the NCI has undertaken in many years. And again, it's because we now have more resources that we can begin to think about doing something like this. But the primary purpose of the trial is really twofold. The first purpose is that many of you are aware that there have been recent approvals by the FDA of three-dimensional tomosynthesis for mammography, and there is the notion that maybe they are better, that this is a real improvement that can really help women save lives, etc. But it really hasn't been rigorously studied. And so we are testing whether there really is an increased benefit in a randomized controlled trial comparing the new approach to standard two-dimensional mammography. And if it turns out that it is better, that's great. But if it turns out that it's not better, it's very important to recognize that so that women won't be exposed to the increased radiation of the three-dimensional mammography, and in addition, the increased cost. But a second part of the trial is for the first time to have a trial in the United States where postmenopausal women at average risk of breast cancer, instead of being screened annually, are screened every other year. And we estimate that this will decrease the lifetime number of mammograms for a woman by 1/3 for the average woman. And this should make things logistically easier, be at least as safe as annual exams. We're practically the only industrialized country that still recommends annual mammography, and will save in medical care tens of millions of dollars every year, even if it turns out that the three-dimensional tomosynthesis is better. So the budget was very flat between 2003 and 2015. But for the last 2 years, the NIH has gotten an increase from Congress. And really, this is very strong bipartisan support. And I'll give you some examples. But I just want you to see that we got the increase in 2016, and then another increase in 2017. In the orange is the 21st Century Cures Bill, which was passed in December, where the NCI is getting a substantial amount of money. But I do want you to understand that 95% of our funding is from the regular appropriation, and that we fund absolutely critical work, such as the investigator-initiated research and training, as well as our special initiatives, such as the RAS initiative. And the two champions are not Tony Fauci and me, who are on the right, but Chairman Congressman Tom Cole and Chairman Senator Roy Blunt, who are the heads of our appropriations subcommittee in the House and in the Senate, respectively. They really have, but it's totally bipartisan. Congressman Cole has been bringing his subcommittee to NIH 3 years in a row, all 3 years that he has been the chair of the committee. And I want, and I'll show you pictures of Senator Blunt brought his subcommittee at the beginning of this month, actually, and we had 9 senators visit the NIH. To the best of our knowledge, there has never before been more than 1 senator at a time who visited the NIH. I just want you to see a little bit about the budget process because last month the budget was finally passed, and Chairman Blunt and Chairman Cole, we were excited because it was during that week that I saw them, and we were very excited about the budget passing. But the 2018 budget, the president's budget has come out, but there's all of this that needs to go by. And when I testified in Congress last week with Senator Blunt's subcommittee, he pointed out correctly that the Obama administration in 2016 actually recommended a $1 billion decrease for the NIH. And so from Senator Blunt's perspective, what everybody else thinks of as a $2 billion increase in FY16 was actually a $3 billion increase. So this is a picture of when the 9 senators came, Senator Blunt's sitting down. I'm the handsome guy in the with the red tie in the middle, and Francis Collins, who I know was here a few months ago, he didn't sing. He did not sing during this discussion. But what's really front and center is the patient, and this is a woman from Billings, Montana, who in 2012 had cholangiocarcinoma, a bile duct cancer that had spread to her liver and her lungs. She had failed all kinds of treatment, and she came to see Steve Rosenberg in the clinical center, and she was essentially the first patient who was treated with what I would call the marriage between immunotherapy and precision medicine. So her tumor was sequenced, and then the neoantigens were identified. Her cells then, they expressed all of the neoantigens, took her cells and screened them, her T cells, and screened them for those that responded to the different neoantigens, found those that responded, grew them up, immunodepleted her, and she has one small area still on her liver, but she was 41, has 6 children, and when I saw her last week, she said she is now a free woman, not because, she's delighted about her cancer, but her oldest daughter passed her driving test. So, and this is the paper published in 2014 in Science that describes the protocol that I described. So the last area I want to talk about is the cancer moonshot. And the overall goals of the cancer moonshot were really to accelerate progress, work better together, and to recognize that big data requires a lot of sharing. And Vice President Biden really was a catalyst for this. I think that he exaggerated the degree to which we in cancer research have been siloed, but as a direct result of his efforts, I really do think that the cancer community has come together and is working much more effectively together. And we are much closer to being able to share big data compared to where we were before. The 21st Century Cures Act is 10 years of funding. The first 7 have money for the NCI and for cancer research. But you can see it's sort of unequal in terms of the amount. And if you assume that each grant that we fund is a 5-year grant, we not only need to fund something today, but we need to have enough money so that we can fund the out years. And so this is how we have thought about what we are doing. The key column really is this right one, where the amount of new first-year money that we are using. So we're doing a little bit less than half this year, so that there's money left over for paying at least some of the out years. But we're taking this. But so there's going to be funding really for 17, 18, and 19. And one of the ways in which the cancer community came together was with the Blue Ribbon Panel. And this was a group of patient advocates, cancer researchers, people from biotech, pharmaceutical industry, and people who did bioinformatics. So it was a wide range of people. And and essentially to identify areas that are poised for progress so that we could, and a limited number of recommendations, not a list of, here are the top 150 things we should be doing, but instead 10. And they really did their job very well. What I love about the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations is not just the group of people that we got together. We got tremendous input online, different conferences, etc. But patients were front and center, even when it comes to trying to understand mechanisms. There's no question but that this is a patient-centered program. And these are the 10 recommendations. And for those of you who have insomnia, you can download this from the NCI website and read the report at your leisure. It's actually quite instructive. I mean, we really feel that the Blue Ribbon Panel did a terrific job. I wanted to just talk about 2 of the 10 recommendations. One is F, and that is symptom management. And I don't think that this is of direct relevance to you all in terms of the research that you're doing, but it's an aspect of putting the patient front and center, because how does the patient feel? What are his or her side effects, et cetera, really are very important. And certainly in pediatric cancer, for example, we know that we can save a lot of lives, all of it as a result of research, okay? 50 years ago, 80% of children with cancer died. Today, 80% plus of children with cancer survive. But long-term serious side effects, a big problem. So the other thing I would like to point out is E, which is fusion oncoproteins in pediatric cancer. And these basically are rearranged genes that lead to making fusion proteins, most of which drive the cancer process for children with cancer. The reason I'm bringing it up is that while there's tremendous financial incentives in the private sector for doing research on adult cancer, especially common adult cancer, there's almost no financial incentive for doing research in pediatric cancer, because each cancer is so relatively uncommon. I mean, it's great that it's uncommon because, we don't want our children to get cancer. But if they do, we want to have terrific treatment available for them. And so this is one of the recommendations, and I just throw out for you all, I know that the fantastic translational research that you have, there are opportunities beyond fusion oncoproteins, but targeting childhood cancer is not something that tends to be done. But again, the public sector has to support the vast majority of this. So this laundry list is all of the different funding announcements and kind of support that we have been providing for this fiscal year. And I'm going to highlight the HPV vaccine trial because it's one of the recommendations to increase HPV vaccine uptake. So this is a this really is a short-term status of what happens in the United States in general for HPV vaccine uptake and what happens in Indiana. And the uptake of the HPV vaccine has been relatively low. And I have a control, which is the meningococcal vaccine, which was approved at just about the same time as the HPV vaccine. And you can see in Indiana, 92% of adolescents, 13 to 17, have received their meningococcal vaccine. Not quite so much when it comes to the children of the same age in Indiana. And I just want you to pay attention also to children from families below poverty. Their vaccine uptake rate actually is higher than children from families that are more well-to-do. So I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. So what are we doing longer term? And we developed post hoc data for our vaccine trial in Costa Rica, where we were testing a vaccine that is not used widely in the United States, called Cervarix, made by GlaxoSmithKline. It just has targets HPV 16 and 18. And it turned out that in the trial, the women who, for one reason or another, only got one dose were as protected as the women who got all 3 doses. And the attack rate in the control group was the same whether in the control group they had 3 doses, 2 doses, or 1 dose. And we analyzed all of this long before the code was broken, so nobody knew who was getting what in this randomized control trial. So that's interesting, but what was even more interesting was that 100% of the women who got only 1 dose seroconverted, and they remained seropositive for HPV 16 and 18 for the 4 years of the trial, and we've now extended this for 7 years. They remain seropositive, 100% of them. This is a subunit vaccine. It is against conventional wisdom. Subunit HPV vaccine, terrific vaccine, hepatitis B, but the antibody levels just go down, down, down. Even for people who've gotten multiple doses. So we think that there's a rationale for trying 1 dose, and we're doing a four-arm trial to test Gardasil 9 with 1 and 2 doses, and Cervarix for 1 or 2 doses. And we're doing this in young adolescents in Costa Rica. It's being co-funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's and there's also parallel immunogenicity trials in Tanzania and in the United States, actually in California. And what we hope will happen is that 1 dose of 1 or both vaccines will actually work very well and confer strong protection. And if that happens, we think that it will greatly increase the potential for increasing uptake of the vaccine, while at the same time saving tens of millions of dollars every year in the US, and will make it feasible to do global vaccination for all girls. So last couple of slides. Just for 18, we have implementation teams that are working hard on developing that. Last week, our Board of Scientific Advisors and National Cancer Advisory Board met together for 2 days and basically recommended all of these different RFAs. And so we're now developing those RFAs. But this is a preview of what will come. And as I say, if you're interested in looking, please take the slides from the Cancer Center. But also we have a website. You just need to go to Cancer Moonshot or Blue Ribbon Panel and at the NCI website, and you can see all the different funding announcements that we have. Although we're trying to do as much as we can, we can't do it alone. Lots of different groups we're trying to partner with them, more successful in some situations than others. You heard about some public-private partnerships already. But I just want to show you with a last slide about something that we're doing that was a self-assembled group that started after the new administration. And this is an international group, 11 different countries, to do cancer proteogenomics. And they are using the SOPs developed through the NCI Tumor Analysis Proteomic Consortium. And all of the countries, they're doing tumors that are important to their respective countries. They are providing the resources to support that research, but they are committed to putting their data at the NCI website, at the database, because that's how it can be made available to most easily to the world. So it's just really remarkable the way that the international community continues to be interested in it. So I just want to say two things with this slide. I'm not talking about you, I want to talk about me. It's been amazing for me to be the acting director of the NCI for the last 2 years. And I get up every day and I say, how can I have the most impact with what we're doing? And it really has been extraordinary. But as many of you have heard, Ned Sharpless from UNC is going to become the NCI director. He and I have gotten together already a couple of times. He's been outstanding at everything he has done in the past. There's every reason to believe that he will be an outstanding NCI director. And he and I are going to be working together as he becomes NCI director, so that we try to have as much continuity as possible. But one thing that I'm not going to change is that when I go back as deputy director of NCI, I will still be asking this same question because I really think it's important for us. We only have one opportunity to do this, and the opportunities are amazing. We need to pick something that's important, something that plays to your strengths, something that's your interest. And ultimately, I think Robin Roberts has it right. Make your passion your purpose. And I think if we do that, we will help our patients while we also help ourselves. Thank you all. Yes, sure.
Dr. Lowy thinks his voice will hold out for a few questions, so are there questions from the audience?
So a general question with regard to new investigator funding with the recent proposal that new investigators perhaps might be funded at a higher percent rate. Where does the NCI stand on that with regard to finding funds for that, and do you think you'll be able to comply?
Well, I think what I tried to show you is that we already are funding a fair proportion of our major awards go to new investigators, but the policy that NIH is developing is still very much under discussion. We certainly want to do our share to support new investigators. I think it will be absolutely impossible for us to go up to what was maybe suggested of everybody at 25th percentile by some categories and 35 for others, because I'm not sure that would be sustainable. We want to have a sustainable workforce. We want to support the best science possible, and a key aspect of that is supporting young people.
So I'll just say that there's a microphone in front of you. You can turn that on if you have other questions.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
Thank you very much.